Hey guys, welcome to the review show. My name's Austin. We live in time stars Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield. An upcoming chef and a recent divorcee find their lives forever changed when a chance encounter brings them together in a decade-spanning, deeply moving romance. The one thing to say right off the bat is that this movie shows how talented Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh are. Really work in this movie. Like their chemistry between one another is amazing. I was really buying the characters' relationship between one another because of their acting, because of Florence Pugh's and Andrew Garfield's chemistry between one another. So I would love to see them in another movie together, just in a better one. I don't hate this movie. I want to make this very clear. I don't hate this movie. I will explain why I don't love it, but trying to stay slightly positive. Cinematography is amazing. This movie looks beautiful. A lot of beautiful colors going on. Good directing, especially when they get very intimate. I think they did a very good job not to go overboard when it comes to sex scenes. And honestly, there's not a lot of sex scenes. I hate when a movie, especially a romance movie, has a lot of sex scenes, and that's like the driving force to like show, hey, these characters are in love because they're doing it, and it's like, no, that's not how that works. But there's actual characterization in this movie and some form of development. Like you see how they met, and you see you see how they click with one another, and you see that it's really that starts off as a fling that turns into something real. And I think they did a good job at that, mostly because Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield. Really, I don't think the writing is bad, but it's the way that it's told kind of hurts the movie a tiny bit because it goes back and forth of how different like time periods is the best way I can say. Whenever a movie does that, when it goes back and forth between time, it can get very messy, it can get very janky, and it can feel disconnected between one another. But they do a very good job showing that you're in the present time or in the past, because as usually in other films it's kind of like jarring, like, okay, where are we now? Are we in the past? Are we in the future? Where the fuck are we? But here it's like they really show off of like how the characters look from the past and the present. They give a picture in your head to make you understand where you are in the story. That doesn't fix the problem when a story is told like that, and that's very clear from the beginning. The movie shows them already together, and I think it's hinted at that they already have a kid. It wasn't very clear on that aspect. But literally, like 2 seconds later, when Florence Pugh walks out of the room, and next when Andrew Garfield is walking past like a doorway, you can see Florence Pugh immediately pregnant when she wasn't pregnant 2 seconds ago. So it's like, what the fuck? It's like, Andrew, what sperms you got going on in there? You got some really strong ass genes, dude. Being a little dramatic, I know, but point being, it's going to be that jarring when you tell a story like this. And it's not someone telling them how they met. It's not someone telling the story to another person or anything like that. That's how literally the movie is told, and I never really like that unless it is someone telling the story to another person that is in the movie, because then there's like some form of foundation in the film, and you get an understanding of what's happening. But here it just feels like random scenes, and it's like, hopefully this is the right moment for this scene to go up, because this is where we are at in the story and in the movie. So hopefully the scene feels purpose in this moment, and most of them do. Whenever they cut back and forth, like they do feel they are in the right place, but it can mess with the character developments, and the character developments do get lost at some point in the film. I was really enjoying it at the beginning. I was believing their chemistry. I was believing that, like, okay, you have this guy who is dealing with a divorce aftermath, and next you have the chef who is like in like her prime, and she's like opening a restaurant for the very first time, and she's very competitive, so she's kind of like lifting Andrew Garfield up, like he's like in like his worst time ever, and she's kind of there like lifting him up. Kind of has that purpose to bring him up. It kind of becomes like a verse block whenever they cut back to the present, because in the present she finds out that she has cancer, and so he has to kind of like lift her up, while in the present time, be that lifting up spirit that she was in the past. At some point, character developments kind of just slowly stop caring about their love relationship between one another, because whenever they do cut to the past, it just feels like past feels like a montage type of moment. There's not really that much conversation between them, or some conversations in the past throughout the film, but besides that, there isn't really that much there. It's just mostly like music and montages, and next to like, or like it's them at like a theme park, and like it's Florence Pugh Andrew Garfield hanging out, and there's music playing, and like you don't hear the conversation between them. And when they do have a conversation, and there was this one point in the film, it cuts to them in the middle of a conversation, and you understand what the conversation is, but that takes a bit of time to pick up on what they are trying to talk about. There was really no setup to the conversation. It felt kind of out of nowhere. There's a couple moments like that throughout the film, especially when like when they decide to cross into being more than just a fling and actually wanting to have a kid. Because originally Florence Pugh wasn't that person that wanted to have a kid or really didn't want to have like a family, but at some point in the film she just suddenly just does. And I get that minds can change, but there was no progression to that change. Like you do see their bonds and you see their love getting stronger throughout the film. There's no scene showing that click for her to be like, maybe I want a kid. Maybe that's something I want to do. So Andrew Garfield's character is very lacking. Like there is just very, very little character development. He doesn't really go through much. He's kind of like the same person throughout the whole entire film. He's this like really understandable, nice guy that can somewhat go overboard a tiny bit. I could not fucking tell you anything about like Andrew Garfield's character that much. I know he had a divorce. I know that he had a job, but I don't know that much about his job, and I could not. I know that he mentioned something that like a food that he likes, I think, but I can never tell you what the fuck that food was because the movie never integrated it into the film. Even though you have a person that is a chef, so you could have had a scene like bonding over their love of some form of Florence Pugh making his favorite food to see what he thinks of her cooking. You could have had something like that to build up both of their character development, but no, they kind of leave Andrew Garfield out of the film, even though he is present there, but it's sometimes he's just kind of just there standing and smiling. Florence Pugh is like this independent type of person, but she learns to grow a somewhat form of attachment with Andrew Garfield, and she learns to trust him with certain information. But when we get to the present time, they kind of undo Florence Pugh, where she suddenly not really trust him, but like there's this competition that she wants to do, but she can't do it because she has cancer, and she's worried that her Andrew Garfield won't let her do it, even though that we've seen him be there as a supporter and an understander and does bend over backwards for her. It doesn't really make any sense for her not to trust Andrew Garfield to let her do this, and this is something that she really wants to do. It just seems like it's a forced conflict situation to come back later on in the film, which is what it was. And it's like, why? If they shown Andrew Garfield being somewhat untrustworthy or in some form of like, almost over demanding type of situation, then I could buy it. But this guy is like, throughout the whole entire film, he is very understandable. And, he wants to make sure that Florence Pugh is like the happiest person ever. It's kind of hard to get behind her motives when the movie's about, hey, this competition and living in the moment with the people that you love, but the people that you love aren't really part of those moments. It's really hard to be any form of attached and care. And when everything kind of comes to like the realization of like, hey, she's doing this thing behind her husband's like potential future husband's back, she gets caught and she kind of feels bad, and it's like, well, you wouldn't feel bad because you got caught. It's like it's the same thing when anyone cheats on you. It's like like in the moment you're like, I'm sorry. It's like you're only sorry because you got caught. There is like, and that's how I felt about her character in the moment. And I'm like, do you feel sorry because you're doing this thing? And I get it that you understand. I understand when the movie does get emotional and telling the story of Florence Pugh dealing with cancer and wanting to live in the moment instead of worrying about the future and what is going to be coming up, and she wants to achieve things right now instead of waiting. It does work. I think it has to deal with Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh's chemistry between one another that really holds up this film, and it does feel somewhat manipulating because they're the ones that are holding the story up. When I think about the writing, I think that it's very messy, and that if it wasn't Florence Pugh being a very likable person, I would not like her character very much. The character is very like I want, and never gives anything back. A lot of people are probably getting upset that I'm bashing down Florence Pugh, but believe me, when you think about the writing, really all the emotions that are there are from Florence Pugh's acting and taking whatever material that she has to make something out of it. Like that's the problems I have with this movie, and some of the times it does feel like some form of montages throughout the film. I'm gonna give We Live in Time a C plus. There's things I really like about the acting is amazing. You know, the soundtrack is decent. I really like the cinematography, a lot of beautiful colors, and a lot of nice moments in the film. And maybe that's what the movie is trying to go for, remembering these moments in life. But that does not work when you're trying to get me attached to these characters when I don't know anything about them. And one of them I do know the most about, and I don't really like that much because she doesn't really do anything to be redeemed towards the end. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Like always, I'll see you guys in the next review. Bye, guys.